You're listening to Opera Box Score.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Wherever you are, however you're listening, it's America's talk radio show about opera. This is Opera Box Score. I'm George Cedarquist, joined this week by Oliver Camacho and Matt Cummings. All right, this week it's a 2-point conversion when the OBS scores an interview with MacArthur Don't Say the G Word fellow, Matthew Aucoin. The composer, conductor, and author goes inside the huddle with Oliver to talk about his breakthrough opera Eurydice and to come to the defense of that dreadful ballet sequence in La Traviata. And then, should all seats be created equal in the Opera House? An article in The New Yorker argues about the inequality of how we watch performances. Plus, in the 2-minute drill, Opera America apologizes for its first apology. And a certain Sandra is back on the market. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast. Stitcher and Spotify, you click follow. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, just hit the plus sign. And please send us a voice memo or email us your hot takes, operaboxscore@gmail.com. You're going to get an OBS beer coaster and an OBS lapel pin just for sharing your own hot take. One day I'm going to make OBS hockey jerseys for everybody. You'd look so good in one, Oliver.
Okay. Thanks. They're too big. They're oversized, aren't they?
No, they can be fitted. They can be fitted.
We can get it tailored for you.
Okay. Yeah, the thing about men's clothing is that it's always, when it fits well in the shoulders, it's always too tight in the tummy. So I need to, maybe a hockey jersey is what I should have been wearing all along. So
I think you'd look great in a hockey jersey. Matt Cummings, you would also look good in a hockey jersey.
I mean, anything where blocking and tackling is involved is basically, you can't keep me away.
Okay, how about body checking? That's a hockey thing.
I don't know what's
You're
going
just
on,
saying
George.
a bunch of words.
I'm just
right
saying
now.
a bunch of words and hoping that some of them are the correct.
Here's a word that I don't say often. It's the word NASCAR. I like to watch Formula One racing. NASCAR is its own sort of thing, but get this. In 2023, NASCAR is coming to Chicago with a race as part of the season, which is going to happen on Chicago's city streets.
So would you say that Formula One is to NASCAR as opera is to, let's say, musical theater? I don't know if that's a fair...
As opera is to, like, playing the harmonica. Let's talk some opera.
Huddle up. Let's go inside the huddle.
Okay, so we were so fortunate after many months of chasing this interview to finally be able to speak to Matthew Aucoin. Of course, the gigantic publicity push for all of his great works, his opera being presented at the Metropolitan, his new recording coming out with the Orpheus Moment with the Boston Modern Orchestra, I think it's called, and his own company, the American Modern Opera Company, and then his Atlantic article, which coincided with the release of his book. All of that happened months ago at this point, but now he finally has time to talk to us. Obviously, we're going to talk a lot about the opera Eurydice. I had sent this guy a pre-interview thinking that he had no time and like he just needed to know what I was going to ask him and just like knock it out. But he ended up being so generous and so open and so just incredible, talking about every subject I wanted to ask him about. And it ended up being one of my favorite conversations we've captured here for our audience at the OBS. So let's dive right into it. I'm going to say that there'll be 2 clips. The first one we'll hear right away, which comes from the final dress of Eurydice at the Met with Aaron Morley, the Act 2 aria, There Was a Roar. And then at about, I think, the 5-minute point of the interview or 6-minute point, we will hear a soprano named Adelaide Bodecker with pianist Clinton Smith. And that aria will be set up quite well by Matthew himself.
I think my husband was with me. What was my husband's name?
My guest today is the 2018 MacArthur Fellow, composer and conductor, and I just found out vocal coach from a lot of things, and author, Matthew Aucoin. Welcome to operaboxscore.
Thanks for having me, Oliver.
So we are, almost 9 months after this gigantic inundation of Matthew Aucoin content that happened in the fall. We had your book come out, The Impossible Art, Adventures in Opera, a recording that you made with the Boston. You have to remind me of the name of the ensemble. The Boston.
Yeah. Boston Modern Orchestra Project, better known as BMOP.
Boston Modern Orchestra Project, and your own company, the American Modern Opera Company, you're calling AMOC?
Yes, we colloquially known as AMOC.
Okay. And a little opera that you wrote that was premiered by a tiny company in New York called the Metropolitan Opera. A lot of stuff happening, and so we've been trying to talk to you about it. And we finally found a little island of time where you can spare. So thank you so much for being on the show. And I guess the big entry point for a lot of people will be for you, the opera, Eurydice. So congratulations on that, first of all.
Thank you.
And I mean, had a chance to actually listen to the radio broadcast because I work in radio, if you can't tell. And I was just struck by how... This is going to sound like I'm a jerk, but it was very listenable. You know, I could really just engage with it, and I didn't feel too challenged by the music. And the cast was great. And Erin Morley, who was on the show before she started rehearsing, was talking about how wonderful it was. And yeah, I was just really looking forward to it, and it delivered. And so congratulations on that. I was really, really thrilled that a work is out there right now that in a way is setting another marker on the timeline of opera. And I don't know if you intended to do that, but we know that, we have the Monteverdi and we have the Gluck and any number of, Orfeo-centric operas. And they always seem to designate, the start of something or the end of something or a pivot in opera. How do you feel about that characterization of Orpheus as a subject matter for an opera?
That's so interesting. I mean, it would be insane for a composer to kind of think, I'm going to set a marker in operatic history. After I have breakfast this morning, I'm going to set a historical marker. But you're right that those pieces have been kind of harbingers of a new era in a way. I mean, of course, the Monteverdi, the Gluck was kind of a radical simplification in certain ways. I would also add a really bonkers piece that I love, which is Harrison Birtwistle's The Mask of Orpheus, which is one of the most over-the-top, hyper-complex pieces from the 1980s.
Is he British? With a name like Birtwistle?
Yeah, Birtwistle was British. He passed away earlier this year, actually. Great and beautifully curmudgeonly composer. And, I wanted to approach this myth because I think it's the most musical of stories. It tells this spectacular story about what music can do and also about what human beings can't do. Music can conquer death, but human beings can't because we always, find a way to screw it up. But as I've said before, I kind of got depressed with the idea of just telling the story from the same end of the camera. And so it was a total breath of fresh air to find Sarah Ruhl's play, which I thought not only inverted the myth, but also sort of derailed, or rather used the myth as a pretense almost to tell a completely different story about a young woman's inner development, and it becomes this extraordinary Oedipal psychodrama involving an encounter with your dead father and these questions of who you are after death. So in a way, the myth was the gateway drug. I knew that it would kind of make opera fans go, oh yeah, I know that story. But then I wanted people to feel partway through that, wait, we do not know this story. This is a different story. So I hope that doesn't make me sound too conniving, but it's not your grandmother's Orpheus myth.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously credit to Sarah Rule, whose play this opera is based on, and she wrote the libretto for the operatic version, correct?
Yes, she did.
Yeah.
We worked together quite closely on it.
This, I mean, there were so many lyrical moments in this show, and I guess that's what I'm getting at, is that there is recognizable lyricism in this opera, which makes it very easy for somebody like me with a small brain to engage with. But the words also are so touching. There's this, I'm going to cry if I start thinking about this letter that Eurydice writes to Orpheus's new wife or future wife about like how to take care of him, or like how to brush his hair or something like that. Like, I don't know. I don't remember the exact text, but I remember listening to it and thinking, oh my God, that is, it was just so touching and beautiful. And I don't know if you had special pleasure in writing music for those words, because they touch on their own.
I'll tell a quick story about that. That's the aria that ends the opera. At the first workshop of the opera at the Met in 2018, we only workshopped the first 2 acts out of 3 total because I hadn't finished the piece yet. And we had the text for that aria, but it hadn't been set to music yet. And the soprano who was singing Eurydice in the workshop actually said, I don't think you should set that text to music because no one is going to be able to get through it without crying. And of course I thought, well, you're right, but isn't that every composer's dream? A text that has that kind of tidal, overwhelming effect. So of course I did end up setting it to music.
So another way audiences were introduced to you, maybe those who don't listen or don't watch PBS or didn't go to the HD broadcast, was this article that came out that you wrote, which is adapted from the book The Impossible Art, Adventures in Opera. And it was a deconstruction or analysis, I should say, of the finale of The Marriage of Figaro, which, is something that is going to make me cry no matter if I see it at a college performance, if I see it in one of those terrible young artist programs, I'm sorry, or if I see it with a cast that I don't care about. There is something about that finale that just, gets to me every time. And if you are one of those people that also is highly affected by that music and by that moment in opera, and you haven't read this article, go find it. It's was published in the Atlantic, or maybe get the book. And you really broke it down. Like, you really said, okay, here's what you're hearing. This is what, here is the music of pleading. Here is the music of forgiveness. Here is the music of, compassion, Yeah. So I was really glad that somebody was able to articulate that. And it makes me think that you really love opera and you really listen to other composers. And it's not just like this, narcissistic pursuit of being, I'm an opera composer too, There's no question there, is there?
No, well, I appreciate hugely that it reached you. And I do think, people who love Figaro in particular, it's a special breed. We recognize each other, we seek each other out. And that last scene, and actually other scenes in the opera too, have always been very important to me because of the perspective that Mozart is writing from. He's writing from within every character, I think, and also he's inhabiting some kind of spirit that's hovering near the ceiling, like Puck or Ariel in The Tempest, who's kind of looking down on the mortals and kind of giggling at them a little bit and saying, oh, you guys are so stupid, your problems are so trivial, you're so petty, you're so cruel, but I love you anyway. There's this sense of, Wagner would call it redemption, but forgiveness is maybe a better word. And I think for me, that's one of the deepest things that opera as an art form can do, is to give us these impossible perspectives on our own lives. It's funny. I think compassion has become a little bit suspect in the age we're living through, not just in opera, but in fiction and movies and things. There's this sense that how dare you presume to know what's happening in the inner life of someone else. It's seen as automatically a potential appropriation, which in some cases it can be. There's risk in it. But also, for me, if I weren't trying to understand what other people experience, why would I bother being an artist? Why would I bother, especially working in opera, where you have to see things from many perspectives? So this is a long way of saying that I think Mozart does that better than almost anybody, and it's what kind of hooked me on the art form in the first place.
Well, there are so many moments that I could think of in Mozart operas especially, but in the many different operas that are just moments that make me stop and listen. I mean, even in Act 2 of Figaro, that moment when the Count basically tells the Contessa, you're a liar, and you just, it's like, it's horrifying. And you just, I don't know, depending on how it's played on the stage, like, you could have a countess on the floor weeping or whatever, or she could be like really defiant, but it's in the music. There's something where he crossed the line. He says something so brutal to her. And I don't know what it is, but whenever I hear it, I get really emotional, That
is a brutal moment.
Yeah.
And also the moment when he says, non so niente, and then the music stops for a second. And there's kind of this sense of, oh, shit. Yeah. This is not a joke. This is for real.
Yeah. But anyway, I also heard you talk about Rigoletto, which you conducted at Los Angeles recently, 2 years ago?
A few years ago.
Yeah.
It's funny. I'm prepping to conduct a Traviata in Houston now, so I'm really in that. I'm deep inside that middle Verdi place. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would tell people to seek out the podcast you did for LA Opera on. You talk about the whole opera, but you also talk about Cortigiani and how Verdi is really breaking form with what was expected in the bel canto period by just with this aria, like 3 different times trying something, and you think it's going to go, oh, okay, now we're going to get a cappelletta here, but instead it goes the opposite. Like we get this cantilena moment at the end because he's desperate, and you also talked about how in Caro Nome even, like Verdi gives you this moment of respite musically, but not really, because just as it's concluding, you get the courtiers coming in about to kidnap her. So it's like, yeah. So it makes me want to just like hear you talk about all of these things. And I guess the point is to go buy the book, right?
Right. That's the ultimate tagline is everyone should buy the book. No, I mean, I'm not the first person to point out how Cortigiani is a totally revolutionary aria. Yeah. But the thing that blows my mind about it is that Rigoletto is actually saying what's happening at a structural level. You know, he's saying, oh my God, this isn't working. I have to try something else. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, Verdi, the composer, is thinking, this isn't working. I have to try something else, you know? Up till then, I mean, with a few small exceptions, in that Italian tradition, an aria expresses, or, you know, a section of an aria, a cabaletta or whatever, expresses a fixed state of mind. You know, I am defiant, or I am sad, or I am hopelessly in love, or whatever. And normally, of course, we start with a cantabile section, and then it kind of bursts into a cabaletta. And Cortigiani goes in reverse. Mm-hmm. It starts with this. It's not a cabaletta, but it's a very up-tempo, intense. It's
pounding against roller coaster at the beginning. And you know, I've never heard anybody talk about it, but I wonder if, you know, you worked with did you work on Muti on this on Rigoletto at all, or who did you coach that with, anybody, or mentor or assist anybody that was famous? I know you've worked with a lot of famous people.
I didn't work on this piece specifically with Muti when I was studying with him in Chicago. Though, you know, he did do Macbeth and the Requiem and some other Verdi. Well,
there's like those chords that happened right at the beginning of Cortigiani that we know that just behind the door, Gilda is being raped. So I feel like we don't talk about that enough. Like it's a rape, and it's so much violence happening just beyond what the audience can see. But I feel like Verdi put it in the score right there.
Yeah, I mean, Rigoletto is he's on a kind of leash. He's like straining against a leash is what it feels like to me at the beginning. Or, you know, he's hitting a wall again and again. It's a kind of futile motion. And that to me is what's extraordinary, is that kind of Verdi builds the futility of it into the music so that he then has to try another tack. And he becomes more and more eloquent and more, he speaks more and more beautifully. Still doesn't work, but it's an extraordinary kind of progression.
Well, now that I've got you here and you just revealed that you're working on Traviata, can you please explain to me this ballet that happens at the beginning of the gambling scene? Like the little...
Oh, I love that section.
Why is that there? What are we supposed to get out of it?
Oh, to me that's one of the great masterstrokes of the piece. Act 2 of Traviata is one of my favorite operatic acts, because it traces this huge trajectory from, you know, Alfredo and Violetta being happy in their country home to, you know, to everything falling apart. But if you think about how intense her scene with Germain is, and then how intense the confrontation at the party is, I think what Verdi recognized was, we need a palate cleanser. We cannot just careen from the intensity of the Germain scene directly into that. So I think what he wanted to do with the Gypsy ballet and then the
Romani,
the Matadors is that he wanted to lull us into a false sense of security for a second. And for me, it really works, especially because there are two ballets, you know. And I actually think the music is pitch perfect, you know, as far as setting the tone. So, you know, if it were 15 minutes long, it would be horrible and boring, but it's like 5 minutes long. And for me anyway, I think if the performers play it right, when Alfredo bursts in, we almost should have forgotten what was about to happen. We should be kind of lulled into a sense of, oh, I'm just watching a silly 19th century party scene, you know? So for me, I think Verdi often has a really great instinct for when to drop in a palate cleanser. And that's an example.
Well,
But you're not a fan?
I
You
just
disagree?
I've never seen it pulled off in a way that's convincing. I mean, I guess that Willie Decker production, that production when I first saw it, I was very, very touched by it. But no, I've yet to watch that scene and feel like, oh, okay, that worked this time, you know? So I was like, please be done with this. But that's okay. We'll move on.
No. I mean, look, I get it. We all want to spend more time with the characters we care about, but I would just add that I think it's also important in Traviata to get a sense of the kind of shallow social world that Violetta moves in. You know, that's why Finding Alfredo means so much to her, because she's stuck with these people who have dress-up parties all the time and who are, who are,
all right.
you know.
Awesome. Yes, I like that answer. So we did already touch on the fact that you were an artist in residence at LA Opera, and it's my understanding that you worked with the young artists while you were there, and you also did some coaching at Caramore, and you were on the music staff of the Metropolitan Opera, and you were here in Chicago at Lyric Opera, it's my understanding. So you've had a lot of experience working with singers, especially singers who are still developing their careers and maybe even their techniques. Have you learned anything about composing for the voice from young artists?
Yeah, no, a huge amount. Especially in my first few years, you know, in college and just after working as a coach and a pianist and an assistant conductor in various places. You know, singing is such a physical act, and it's such a delicate balance, and it asks so much of the singer that I really think every composer who wants to write operas should have to work as a vocal coach or a pianist, or, you know, not everyone plays the piano, but they should work with singers in a kind of intimate, performance-based way. Because what it does is it teaches you sympathy for what for what people are trying to do and how hard it is, and what's possible. I think, you know, you learn what it feels like for someone to run out of breath because tempo is too slow. You learn what it feels like when you know, a poor tenor is stuck singing a note that's right in their passaggio and they have to sit on it for 5 minutes and they're in agony, you know. And so these are things that you then avoid doing as a composer, unless you are looking for a super specific agonized effect, which I think is a special sauce that should not be, you know, overused. So yes, the short answer is yes, I learned a huge amount from working with young artists in all these places. And, you know, in LA, the cool thing was I was in residence there for 4 seasons. So I was able to really get to know the singers who were part of the company. You know, every year we did a little recital tour around Los Angeles. We performed in practically every section of the city. And we would sometimes do coachings for whatever else they were working on. So yeah, for me, it's an essential aspect of being a composer, just keeping a direct contact with the people you're writing for.
And how has that work and that understanding of the voice influenced the sort of projects you are doing with your company, American Modern Opera Company? And we should also just talk about what it is and what has happened so far and what plans to happen with that.
So the American Modern Opera Company, or AMOC, as we call it, AMOC, is a collective of singers and instrumentalists and dancers, and a director, Zach Winokur, and a composer, me. And Zach and I co-founded the company about 5 years ago in order to give artists more agency in developing the projects that they really want to be working on. You know, it's something that's so obvious because we're used to it, but let's just think for a second about, in a typical opera company, who are the people who work there year in and year out? Well, you know, the administration and the orchestra and the chorus and maybe a music director. But the singers and the directors and the conductors come and go. They change with every production. And singers in particular have very little agency about who they work with. Let's say two singers have amazing artistic chemistry. They really can't do much except for, tell their agents to book them for something 4 years in the future. They can't do much to keep working with those people. And so what Zach and I wanted to do with Amok was to say, all right, let's create a company that's really a company, where the thing that is stable is the artists themselves. And let's find artists that really want to work together, and let's see what happens. And the way it works is we gather every summer in Vermont, where both Zach and I have houses, and we work on many projects, which we then perform during the year. And most recently, Amok was the curator of the Ojai Festival in Ojai, California, which is an amazing 4-day long epic, like the Burning Man or the Coachella of contemporary classical music. And we curated that festival, and also the artists of Amok basically performed the entire festival. I mean, we had to do about 19 different programs in 4 days. So that's the most recent thing Amok has done. And now I think we're all taking a long breather, and we're going to reconvene in August and figure out what's next for the company.
So it's sort of like a commedia troupe in a way, except
exactly.
Yeah. But so
rolling into the village square in
exactly.
a wagon. Yeah.
But you were talking about giving the artists agency. Does it mean that they also the singers can choose repertoire that is not composed by Matthew Aucoin? Or is it always going to be your music?
Sorry, Oliver.
Yeah.
Could you repeat that?
Yeah,
my connection froze.
I know.
It'll be fine. It'll be fine on the recording I'm making.
So you were describing the ensemble as giving the artists agency, and especially the singers agency. I'm curious to know, can they pick their repertoire, or is it always going to be a Matthew Aucoin joint?
Oh no, it's not always my music. Okay. And in fact, the singers can do more than pick their repertoire. They can devise whole projects. For example, just this past week, Amok debuted a staging of Messiaen's song cycle Arawi, featuring Julia Bullock, one of our company's singers. And Julia and Zach had been wanting to stage Arawi since they were in school together, like 9 years ago. So a lot of the productions that Amok does are pieces that the singers particularly want to sing. The same goes for our production of Henze's opera El Cimarron, featuring Devon Tynes. So Amok's singers are Devon, Julia, Anthony Roth Costanzo, and Paul Appleby. And all four of them are,
I love all four of them so much.
Yeah, me too. And all four of them are just like well springs of ideas. And I should say, we're talking about the singers because this is an opera podcast, but the dancers and instrumentalists in the company also have agency. That's the point, is it's a company of people who all generate ideas and perform in each other's projects.
Nice. Well, that's American Modern Opera Company, which has is featured on the recording of your vocal works, the Orphic Moment, and there's other things on this recording. But we'll put all the links on the site. But is there anything else you'd like to say about what Amok is doing, or what Amok we should be paying attention to? Maybe just taking a break right now.
Well, Ojai took all of our energy, so we're going to reconvene soon. But I would just say for singers or performers of any kind who are listening, it's been a real blessing and a kind of a safe haven to have my own ensemble. I love working with companies around the world. I love doing large scale opera, and I will hopefully do that forever. But as we all know, this industry can feel a little bit anonymous. It can feel a little bit lonely. You're traveling around, you're doing this, you're doing that. So kind of creating a space where you have your artistic family and where you can actually build relationships over time has been really great. And I would strongly recommend it, especially because we need new models. We need companies that are built on new models, because I don't see anybody building a new, Wiener Staatsoper anywhere. We need to build stuff that looks completely different.
And it should always include Julia Bullock.
Oh, yes,
if
obviously.
Well, Matthew Aucoin, thank you so much for being on Opera Box Score.
Thanks for having me, Oliver. It's a pleasure.
I don't know if I'm convinced about that ballet sequence in La Traviata, but,
At least someone's out there making a case for it.
Matt is, he is a, don't say the G word, MacArthur fellow. And so maybe we should listen to our G's,
Here's something else which I am trying to understand right now. It's a sports thing, and then we're going to get to Chalk Talk in a second. Is that, so here in Chicago, Soldier Field, of course, is where the Chicago Bears play. The team is threatening to move to the suburbs. The city is trying to keep them downtown at Soldier Field, and so has now suggested that a dome be placed on top of Soldier Field so that it can be used for more months of the year, like not basically wintertime, with a whole bunch of extra amenities. And if you look at the renderings, like some architect already messed up Soldier Field when they sort of created this extended seating. And now this
when it became
dome,
guaranteed rate or something like that, didn't it change
that
its
was
name?
for the White Sox, yeah.
Oh, okay.
But this dome on Soldier Field, it's going to expand the capacity. It's going to add more men's urinals. And it's going to quadruple the amount of concession stand areas.
Okay, to be clear. Chicago Cubs, Bears, sorry, perform.
The grown-up ones.
They play basically just south of the downtown area of Chicago along the lake. They are considering moving to a suburb, Arlington Heights, and Mayor Lori Lightfoot is trying to get them to stay by offering this roof to the cost of it's not clear who will be paying for this roof. But did I hear it's $2 billion? There'll be $2 billion to build.
It could be as much as $2 billion.
That's
tell
quite
you,
an expensive hat.
Yeah.
It would be George J. Taxpayer.
Okay.
Is the person who would be paying for this.
Sounds a lot like George J. Cedarquist.
That would be me.
Chalk Talk on Opera Box Score.
Last week, The New Yorker republished an article by staff writer Janet Malcolm, who died in 2021, about her memories of attending the old Metropolitan Opera with her father. Specifically, the article talks about where the pair sat in the house up in the third or possibly fourth level. She goes on to say that the performing arts is an inequitable medium of interacting with this art form. If you read a poem, no matter how wealthy or poor you are, we're all reading the poem in basically the same way. But when we go to the performing arts, of course, where we sit is based largely on how much we can afford to pay. Of course, sports is exactly the same way. The seats right behind home plate or against the glass for hockey are more expensive than the nosebleeds. Is there a better way to actually do this, or does a better way need to be created? Matt, in the article, Janet talks about how she loathed the rich people sitting right at the front of the main floor. Is that the best place to sit, in your opinion?
Yeah, I would actually say that the arts are, in this case, this is one of the rare times that the arts are more equitable than sports, because if you're like trying to follow a hockey game from the nosebleeds, like good luck seeing where that puck is from 1,000 feet up. But I actually think that there is such a thing as sitting too close to the stage at the Opera House, because there's something about the way that the sound like all blooms and comes together in the acoustic, and usually that doesn't happen in the first couple rows. And if anything, the sound is often better like up at the top of the galleries, where you might not be able to see the facial expressions, but like which of those things is really more important when you're talking about an opera singer and like what they are how they're trying to express what's going on in in the moment.
I know I've sat everywhere in the house. And yeah, in Chicago especially, there are some primo seats for visuals that are awful for the auditory experience, where the sound isn't blended. You're getting a lot of the orchestra and the singer's voice is just kind of going over your head. But you can see the stage, you can see, facial expressions, you could see spit flying, and there's something exciting about that. I just want to say that I do think it can be equitable if you learn to circumnavigate the hierarchy like I did before I used to get free tickets for all my publicity that I do. I used to stand outside of Lyric Opera and just try to look poor and adorable. And it worked through most of my 20s.
I mean, you still have one of those things.
It worked, and it's usually these people who subscribe, who the wife or the husband doesn't feel like it that night or is quote unquote sick, and the poor spouse is there like holding 2 tickets trying to sell the second ticket. But starting in the early aughts, there was no longer such thing as a sold out house, so people could still buy tickets. So more often than not, whoever was out there selling tickets was trying to discount the tickets severely just to get some kind of compensation. If you wait long enough and if you look cute enough, you actually get in for free.
You can get by on the pleasure of your company alone.
Exactly.
Oliver, let's say money is no object. So where do you like to sit at, say, Lyric? Like, where's your choice?
Okay, I lied. I've never sat in the boxes at Lyric Opera Chicago. Yeah. I assume those are the best seats because they're right. Well, because they're right above the overhang. That is like the dead zone if you're sitting on the main floor,
which is especially bad at Lyric, but really is an issue at most houses that have a big old balcony.
Yeah, but also are just high enough where you can sort of look down at the stage, but you're not looking at the tops of people's heads.
How about you, Matt? You've got all the money in the world. Where do you sit in the opera house?
I mean, that's why my favorite seat that I've ever sat in Lyric is like at the very front of the dress circle, so that you're above so you're basically right on the ceiling of those boxes, in front of the overhang from the upper balcony, and you can kind of see the whole stage at once, and it's close enough to get some kind of definition, but also you're far away enough that you can see the whole thing in one glance if you want to.
The dress circle at Lyric is the third floor, essentially. Like main floor, the boxes, and then the third floor.
Lower balcony, the front of the lower balcony.
Yes.
Why is it called the dress circle?
Because you better be dressed to go there.
I guess you better.
You better be wearing a circle of some sort.
You must be circular. It's true. Whatever you do not sit under the overhang. The sound is...
Avoid at all costs.
You really should.
There is one row of seats at Lyric Opera Chicago which divides the 2 main seating sections, like a large... leg room. It's like sitting at over like where you have to
it's like being in the bulkhead.
Exit.
Yeah
Exactly. So you have leg room for days, which is kind of nice. I'm a leg crosser, and like
when you
and when you cross your legs in a regular aisle, your knee or your foot ends up pushing up against a person's seat, and I don't mind that, but usually the person in front of me minds it. So
Malcolm in the article also makes the point, right, that like being close is not necessarily better. She just wanted to hate those people because they were rich, not because they had like quote.
That's something we can all get on board with.
We can all get on board that, right? Like clearly the Met in HD gets us very, very close, and clearly that is not as satisfying, I would say, as being there, live. And
what if there was some kind of revolution like happening at the opera, and all the nosebleed people revolted against the main floor people, and I was caught in the middle because like, no, I was just looking cute today, that's why I'm here.
Well, I have sort of wondered about that sometimes, like what would happen if you took a house, say on the scale of Lyric, which is just shy of 3,500 seats, and you made the whole thing general admission. Like how would that work? Would people show up hours in advance?
I think in a lot of ways you're not necessarily paying for the seats on the main floor as much as you're paying for the rights to socialize on the main floor.
Right.
When you're paying that top dollar.
Exactly. Yeah. Let us know where you like to sit at the Opera House, and hey, let us know where you like to sit at sports events as well. For me, for hockey, love sitting right against the glass. I'm also that guy who really wants to sit in the front row of the Opera House as well. Let us know where you like to sit. operaboxscore@gmail.com. We're going to let you know right now about the 2-minute drill.
This just in, the 2-minute drill.
All right, listen up. Here's everything you need to know about what happened in Operaland this week.
On July 18th, Opera America issued a response to emails leaked from its professional development listserv. In their apology, the industry service organization said, "We will use this incident as an opportunity to improve our service. We will circulate new community guidelines to all listserv users in the coming weeks. We will not tolerate hateful or hurtful discourse in these spaces. We are committed to maintaining a forum for healthy conversation where differences of opinion can be addressed without breaching trust."
Then, on July 22nd, Opera America issued a second apology for their weak sauce first apology. "We apologize. Language used last weekend by participants on one of our listservs and Opera America platform was hurtful, disrespectful, and plainly transphobic. In our statement of response, we did not effectively call it out for what it is. We're truly sorry. In the clearest of terms, we condemn any language or opinion that questions the dignity, identity, or human value of anyone in our field."
Several female employees at the Bayreuth Festival, including festival director Katharina Wagner, have come forward with allegations of sexual assault just days before the opening of their season. Unrelated to the sexual assaults, accusations have also surfaced against former music director and conductor Christian Thielemann for disrespectful remarks towards female musicians.
Russian baritone Vadim Cheldiev has been sentenced to 10 years in prison after his alleged organization of a protest against early COVID restrictions in 2020. Cheldiev was found guilty on charges including incitement to, quote, extremist activity, participation in mass riots, and hitting a police officer.
Congratulations to the recipients of the 2023 Sphinx Organization Medals of Excellence, which are given to Black and Latinx classical music artists. Soprano Andi Marie Moore, composer Joel Thompson, and cellist Thomas Mesa each receive a $50,000 career grant and will be part of Sphinx's 25th anniversary season.
Sandra Radvanovsky has announced her divorce from Duncan Lear on social media. "This is a very difficult time, but I am feeling happy and ready for the next chapter of my life, as well as opening night at the Metropolitan Opera," said Radvanovsky about her upcoming performances in Cherubini's Medea.
In gay sports news, Monet X Change competed as an operatic bass baritone in the recent talent competition of RuPaul's Drag Race. The returning contestant from Season 10 went on to win All-Stars Season 4 and is currently competing in the All-Winners All-Stars Season 7. No spoilers.
In trade news, Minnesota Opera has announced 2 appointments to their music staff. Mario Antonio Mara as head of music and Celeste Marie Johnson as principal coach and chorus director. Mara, a pianist and conductor, served on the music staff at Oper Frankfurt, San Francisco Opera, and Lyric Opera of Chicago, where he was also a member of the Ryan Opera Center. Johnson, a choral pianist, was a young artist with Opera Saratoga of the OBS Summer League, and has previously been engaged with Songfest and the Tanglewood Institute. Both begin in their new roles next month.
After the position having been vacant for years, Daniel Yinga has been appointed general manager of the Romanian National Opera. The general manager position was blocked for some time by lawsuits in court after the former general director Cătălin Ionescu was suspended from office and investigated for embezzlement of public funds.
The Austrian-Iranian conductor Ali Rabari announced that he's been appointed by Valery Gergiev as Mariinsky Theater's principal guest conductor, becoming one of the first international artists to perform in Russia since the war in Ukraine began. "I go to Russia with pleasure and the greatest respect to Valery Gergiev, and I hope that others will follow," said Rabari. Gergiev deserves great respect. If I compare him to politicians, Gergiev was already Gergiev, one of the greatest artists of our time, long before many of the political leaders of today even appeared on the scene. Oh, he's the original asshat.
Sam Linden is the new executive director of Beth Morrison Projects. Linden comes from the nonprofit consulting firm TDC and is joining the organization alongside new board members, bass Morris Robinson, composers Kamala Sankaram, and Gregory Spears.
On the disabled list, Teatro Real de Madrid has announced a cast change for its production of Rufus Wainwright's Hadrian. Alexandra Urquiola will step in for Anwar Arteta as Plotina.
Teatro San Carlo has announced that Claudia Pavone will go on in La Traviata for Pretty Yende, who has the flu. Yende is set to return to the production for performances later this month.
Exit stage right, Hungarian conductor Stefan Scholtes died on Friday night after collapsing during a performance of Strauss's Die Schweigsame Frau at the Bayerische Staatsoper. Scholtes conducted at major opera houses across Europe over the past 4 decades, and previously was music director at the State Theatre of Brunswick and the Flemish Opera.
And on this day, July 25th, in 1710, it was the first performance of Giovanni Bononcini's Tigrane Re d'Armenia in Vienna. In 1798, Luigi Cherubini's L'Hotellerie Portugaise premiered in Paris. In 1898, Italian soprano Maria Zamboni was born in Peschiera. She created the role of Liu in Turandot. In 1909, Italian conductor Gianandrea Gavazzeni was born in Bergamo. In 1930, Maureen Forster, the Canadian contralto, was born in Montreal. And one for Weston, in 1976, it was the first performance of Einstein on the Beach, an opera by Philip Glass, at the Avignon Festival.
Did Maria Zamboni also invent the Zamboni? That's your 2-minute drill.
It's Monet Exchange.
We just heard a little bit of Monet Exchange, whose non-drag name is Kevin Burton, performing a bit of Bellini for you all. That's a weird sort of mashup of the aria, but I assume that it was cut for length because those drag race audiences can't be,
they can't be expected to listen to those long Bellini lines. If no one made a joke about slinging Bellini at drag brunch, then
oh God,
people didn't know their source material well enough.
Exactly.
But they all knew that it was from Sonnambula, right?
That was exactly. That was a very serviceable, rendition of the aria. It's in tune, a nice tone. I have to say, I am not a drag race person. I don't get into drag culture at all, and it makes me a certain type of gay. I am a very opera gay, so here's like the one Venn diagram moment for me. But I don't think that there's a lot of people in that intersection. So, well, congratulations at any rate.
I mean, of the millennials, there certainly are.
Last week on the show, we were dealing with very recent news about Opera America posts on this listserv becoming public through a leak. And now Opera America has apologized not once, but twice about those. First of all, I didn't know listservs still existed. I thought I didn't realize that.
I thought everyone had moved over to Slack by now.
Right? Yeah, exactly. This is a complex story. It's sort of an awful story for me to think that Opera America, which is an organization of which I'm a member and which I support, to think that organization, which has very specifically lifted up the opera as one and has made as one of the top 20 regularly performed pieces of repertoire in this country, to now have these examples of anti-trans behavior is just so disappointing, would be an understatement.
I mean, I won't blame Opera America specifically. I will just say that it shows that the people who we are expecting to be our leaders in this industry are in fact not as progressive as the people that they are trying to serve. So the first statement didn't explicitly call out what was wrong with the activity on that listserv, and it took a lot of people saying, you didn't even mention that it was transphobic or racist or whatever, It
was a lot of,
for
we
them to come
see
up.
you,
Yes.
we hear you, tell us how to be better.
Exactly. There's gonna have they're gonna have listening sessions, and they're gonna go to rehab or something. I don't know.
They can hang out there with Renee Papa.
Listening sessions, indeed. I mean, this is sort of a textbook way of like how not to deal with a huge problem, right? Is you want to get to the heart of it right away, and you want to do the absolute most you can possibly do right out of the gate. And clearly they did not do that, which is why they were apologizing yet again. And as you say, Oliver, to think that those thoughts, not just that those,
well, they distanced themselves pretty fast from whoever that one woman was who wrote the really explicitly transphobic comments.
She's like the outlier.
It's part and parcel of like a general lack of respect, I think, for young artists and young people.
It is. And the note to those people is you can't say don't have those thoughts, right? I mean, like we have terrible thoughts all the time. The problem is do not act on them and do not put them out there in writing in a what you think is a private way, because God knows that the internet is forever and anything that is written down can become public.
So is Die Schweigsame Frau cursed? Now does it have did La Forza del Destino like give up its...
It might.
Its
I mean,
spot?
it's still only 50% as many conductors who have collapsed trying to conduct Tristan and Isolde, so we've got some ground to cover there.
I'm just surprised that Rufus Wainwright's opera Hadrian is being done again.
Hey, we just talked about that in our What's the Gayest Opera?
I think that they programmed it because of our stellar coverage of how gay it is.
I stand corrected. I'd love to see it. I love the Emperor Hadrian. I love the wall that he had built between Scotland and England.
Do you love Sandra Aronofsky? Are you interested in maybe...
I'm a happily married man, so I'm not going to take that bait, Oliver. Nice try. But you know what? Congrats for her. We
love a new chapter. We love a fresh start.
Well, if people are unhappy, then they should get divorced and they should move on. But she's ready for the next chapter of her life, which includes opening night at the Met.
So I'm a fan, and I don't want to like delve into her personal life, but she's the person who put this out there. Is it because she wants to be? Well, there was a time when Maria Callas was the most famous opera singer in the world, and everybody was all up in her business. And do we not have that right now? Do we need a singer who like has business to be up in? So we're curious about who she.
Are you suggesting that she needs to start a relationship with a Greek shipping magnate?
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't know if that would get headlines in the same way in this day and age.
That's the only way to become a prima donna assoluta, is to be married at least twice, and what is another, and to sing Turandot, right? So that's the only thing that's missing now, right, for her.
Problems at Bayreuth, it's just a place where there's just drama all the time. From when it was founded to who founded it to years later with the guy with the swastika tattoo who was like, "Oh, I had no idea. I had no idea
that's a throwback."
Yeah, exactly. This is what's surprising, right? Is it's not surprising that there is sexual harassment, that there's sexual harassment and assault in opera, that there's sexual assault in opera in Germany. None of these things are surprising. These articles from Opera Wire and Deutsche Welle made a big deal that Katharina Wagner, the festival director, had been sexually assaulted. And it was like, why is that surprising? Is it because she's in a position of power? And are we meant to assume that women in positions of power can't be sexually assaulted? I didn't understand the logic behind that.
I mean, you would think that the person who is in charge, who is herself, inherited the position of director as the great granddaughter of Richard Wagner, is like above the petty plays of men across this stage. But no, some things are more ingrained than that even, and one of them is sexism.
Yeah, no one is immune. I will tell you this, is that because Bayreuth is funded by partially by the state of Bavaria, and I think the federal government as well, that they will get to the bottom of that. And look out when they take the sponge to the glass on finding those people. That is not going to be pretty, nor should it be. Let's wrap this show up.
Good call, bad call on Opera Box Score.
Good call, bad call is how we're going to wrap up the show, as always, starting with Oliver Camacho.
Well, in the absence of Weston, who is moving house right now, good luck to you, Weston. It's the worst. I wanted to highlight a radio piece that came out and has a beautiful web article to accompany it. NPR did a profile of Finnish composer Kaija Saariaho, and my favorite part is looking at her super cool Paris apartment with books everywhere and one of those spiral staircases.
Of course she does.
I stand wall-to-wall bookcases.
Matt Cummings.
Zachary Wolf has a write-up in the New York Times about that we'll share in our show notes that's about kind of the history of the Mostly Mozart Festival, which is now largely defunct and has been rolled into other summer festivals of music in New York. And at the end of this piece, he hits on the fact that a lot of the current concerts at Alice Tully Hall this summer are, wait for it, pay what you can. So has the New York Times scooped us again with coming up with the best way to make classical music more accessible to all, George. I leave it up to you.
The old grade lady beats us again.
But that is a good call. I will organize a consortium of open letter writers to demand pay what you can admission, and everything will get solved.
Nothing says summer to me like free outdoor Shakespeare. The kids and I went to see a production of Midsummer Night's Dream over the weekend outdoors here. So wherever you are and however you are enjoying your summer, try and find some free outdoor Shakespeare. There is nothing like it. That's it for this week's edition of America's Talk Radio Show About Opera. Our announcer, he's Norm Waddell. He's at normwaddell.com. Again, make sure you subscribe to the podcast, Stitcher and Spotify. You click follow. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, you just hit the plus sign. Send us that voice memo. Email us that hot take, operaboxscore@gmail.com. You're going to get the OBS beer coaster and the OBS lapel pin. Our creative consultant is Oliver Camacho, and our audio editor is Weston Williams. For our guest, Matthew Aucoin, and your co-host, Matt Cummings, I'm George Cedarquist, asking you to continue the conversation about opera and apologize at the same time. We're back with an all-new show next week when we go inside the huddle with the creative team behind the world premiere of Holy Ground at Glimmerglass. Plus, you get more opera headlines, more hot takes, and more Zingarelle and Matadori. Join us.